Boys, we have a major sandbox change going live in just a mere few hours. Bungie announced in the most recent TWABs all the changes that are going to be arriving today with this big patch, which is a mid-season 18 patch. This will also coincide with the launch of Festival of the Lost, and I do want to mention we will be live all day today playing Festival of the Lost, doing the new Grandmaster Nightfall, and of course testing out all of these sandbox changes. So feel free to come by, guys. We would love to have you. With that being said, let's dive into some of the specifics on what is changing today. Again, if you tuned in for the TWABs, you already know most of these, but this is going to be a brief overview and clarification of what's to come, as well as some deep dives in some of the tweets from Bungie and discussions from the likes of Mercules and others. So first up, auto rifles. Bungie is increasing the effects of stability on all auto rifles when you invest into that stat, and it's unclear whether or not this is going to be linear or exponential distributions across the entire 100 stat point, but what we do know is that it starts at 0 and we see a 20% increase in recoil direction at the top end. Could be 100, could be less. So while you may not be experiencing much of a difference at the low end, if you build into your stability, you should be able to notice a distinct difference here, which by the way, on any automatic weapon, that's very good. Now, precision frame auto rifles are also receiving a small bump to crit damage, going from 30 to now 31. Now, this does not increase optimal time to kill. However, it does allow your precision frame auto rifle to be more forgiving. Optimal TTK when fighting Guardians is 0.8 seconds with 6 crits, 1 body. This is at the current 30 per crit and 20 per body. But with these upcoming changes and that crit being raised to 31 per crit, you'll be able to 5 crit 2 body at 7 resilience or less compared to the previous 5 resilience. Again, a somewhat minor adjustment, but when paired with that stability increase, you may see these auto rifles become much more consistent. And we even went over 11 weapons to be looking at for this sandbox. Amit is definitely going to be my go-to choice to try out first thing, as we believe that's going to really pop off. But other contenders amongst the precision archetype include Horror Story, Braytech Werewolf, The Number, Firefright, Tiger Spite. And again, don't overlook Tiger Spite. It's actually fantastic. And Shadow Price. Now, Braytech and Horror Story, I believe we're going to be getting random rolls or new random rolls for those weapons, starting with Festival of the Lost. And if we are, I will, of course, be reviewing both of those. Now, some other auto rifles that have tremendous stability that should benefit include things like Service Regime with 58 stability. This may actually hit that threshold, allowing that weapon to have significantly less recoil. Another weapon that actually has 100 stability and is also an auto rifle is Quicksilver. Yes, this 720 has max stability, and it already does really good at combat flinch. This 100% should equal that 20% recoil reduction. By the way, if you haven't checked out a review for Quicksilver Storm, feel free to check it out. I was very impressed with it. Other high stability auto rifles, though, to not overlook includes Sweet Sorrow. That's right, get that craftable roll. The Summoner, Reckless Oracle, Crate, and of course, Chroma Rush. These are stability powerhouses that should also benefit from this change. And again, if I can really code this sandbox change that's going out today, this is not necessarily a big, massive change in terms of TTK values or lethality. It's more of a, hey, let's pick up all the archetypes that are poopy and even other weapon types that just don't feel as good to use, and let's just make everything feel better. Moving on, bows. Bow nerf here is actually pretty straightforward. Bungie does not like us swapping really fast. Both lightweight and precision frames are receiving a stow speed nerf, meaning you cannot swap to another weapon and get the easy cleanup after squeezing out a bow shot. And you can see here with lightweights and precisions, 0 to 100 handling stat, the max for both of those is 0.2 seconds that you can get from 100 handling. And that's even with exotics that max out your handling. It doesn't go past that cap. But Cross, what about people with macros that can instantly swap? I have no idea. I mean, we used to have the quick swap glitch that you can easily do, like pressing sprint at the same time as you were swapping, and then of course jumping. I don't know, it's like a weird combination that I can't even remember how to do it, but my fingers would. Regardless, that was nerfed a long time ago. So I'm under the assumption that once this change goes live, you won't be able to do that. Granted, people always find a way to work around things, so we'll see. Moving on, pulse rifles. Bungie is actually making sweeping changes to all pulse rifle archetypes. Now, nothing earth-shattering. The idea here is that Bungie is trying to differentiate between each archetype more and more. They want to rebalance the effect of the handling stat across pulse rifles. The handling stat, of course, affects weapons ready, stow, and aim down sight speed. They also want to increase the effects of handling by 5% at the high end, which will most affect lightweights and adaptive frame pulse rifles. They're also going to be reducing the effects of handling by 2% at the low end, which mostly affects high impact and rapid fire frame pulse rifles. Now, to sum up all these changes, guys, the handling stat curve for all pulse rifles is being adjusted. Some archetypes will be affected more by this change than others because they naturally roll with lower handling. Hence why it creates a greater separation between each archetype. And the reason for this is Bungie is tired of having things like high impacts, which have naturally low handling, still move as fluidly as, say, an adaptive. They want that separation between the two. Now, handling isn't the only thing being readjusted. Range is also being reduced on the low end. They are adjusting damage fall off scale based on the range stats. Zero range reduced 16 meters meters to now 15 meters, and 100 range will remain unchanged. Again, it's obvious Bungie is really trying to make us commit here to certain stats. Stability has become vitally more important, sandbox after sandbox, when it comes to combating flinch, when it comes to the overall consistency of our weapons and the follow-up shot. Range used to be the perk everybody cared about, but you have trade-offs now, right? And it's obvious Bungie is trying to keep things within its intended ranges. Pulse rifles shouldn't be performing in scout rifle territory, or at least far-reaching scout rifle territory. Now, our stat choices are going to become more important here. Granted, it's not going to ruin a good pulse rifle, but with both handling and range being reduced on the low end, it does mean that these overall stats are going to become more and more important, which is going to give overall more value to things like adept weapons and, of course, craftable weapons. Now, looking specifically at adaptive pulse rifles, Bungie has taken the same approach here as they did with precision frame auto rifles and adjusting the crit multiplier. They're increasing the precision multiplier from 1.6 to 1.65x, essentially allowing the crit damage to go from 30.4 to 31.4. Now, this will allow you to get the kill on a Guardian at 4 resilience or less in 6 crits, and yes, a whopping 0.6 seconds. Now, I don't know how many of you are actually walking around with resilience that low. Most of us probably aren't. Even inside of PvP, I'm rocking at least 5 or 6 resilience. However, something many people have not actually keyed in on is when we start to include damage perks like high impact reserves. Yeah, we haven't even disclosed this yet, but a high impact reserve pulse rifle would allow you to easily get that 2 bursts in 0.6 seconds on higher resilience Guardians. Maybe not max, but higher. And I know things like Bygones could roll with high impact reserves. Last Perdition could also roll with high impact reserves. The Vex Offensive Adortative Solar Pulse Rifle could also roll high impact reserves. So there are a few options out there, although some of them are sunsets. We'll be trying this out. Granted, for things like that, you're gonna have to actually like prime your weapon down. A lot of people don't want to go through that much work just to get a kill, but there are people out there that would, and that is a perk that's gonna synergize with the sandbox change even more. I think the main noticeable thing here with these adaptive pulse rifle changes is that they're just gonna be feeling better, which is kind of incredible considering how good that archetype already feels on its own. So be looking for them to really pop off. Bungie is also gonna be targeting Peace of Mind in the rapid fire frame archetype. This is a pulse rifle that had a tad bit too much range, so they're actually gonna be lowering that zoom down from 19 to 18. Now, I still think Peace of Mind is gonna be very, very good. However, the Godroll Horus Lease is still personally my favorite. Now, buff contenders overall for the changes going for pulse rifles include Smiter Moraine, Yesteryear, Syncopation, and of course, Last Perdition. Now, moving on, Scout Rifles. Guys, Scout Rifles, in Bungie's eyes, have gone a tad bit too dangerous. So high impact Scout Rifles specifically are gonna be hit in this mid-season patch, reducing their body shot damage from 42 to 40 and crit damage from 73.5 to now 70. Now, high impacts are still gonna be able to 3-tap, but you are lacking a little bit of forgiveness there. 1 crit, 3 bodies can only kill Guardians 5 resilience or less. And for the most part, you're gonna wanna get 2 crits and 2 body, outside of course getting the 3 crits. Now, personally, it's not all doom and gloom for Scout Rifles. I think there's actually gonna be some scouts that are gonna pop out. Per se's D is actually really good. One of my favorite feeling Scout Rifles in the game. It's even good inside of PvP, even though nobody even uses it. And I think once Jade Rabbit is dealt with, and it's gonna be dealt with again next season, that's probably gonna be a Scout Rifle for me that's gonna pop up in my rotation. Now, Sidearms. Sidearms are actually having their auto-aim fall-off distance increased by 30%. Now, this is a significant change. I said yesterday in our 11 weapons that we are almost in a sidearm meta. Essentially, all weapons, guys, have an auto-aim fall-off distance that is similar or match that to their damage fall-off distance, except for sidearms. Meaning sidearms were meant to perform better than what they were already performing. And once you get past that distance, you can no longer reliably hit crits, even if your aim assist cone overlaps with the Guardian's head. We've talked about these cones in a little more depth in the past, especially in relation to airborne effectiveness. Regardless though, sidearms are gonna be feeling a lot better. Now, with that being said, rangefinder is actually getting adjusted as well. And we're gonna go into like a little explanation of rangefinder and zoom multipliers and how they work to increase auto aim distance. Rangefinder actually grants you a plus 10% zoom multiplier, along with a 20% auto aim distance increase and a 5% faster projectile speed. Now, in the sandbox change coming today, they're removing the additional 20% bonus on aim assist fall off. Now, what this really means for sidearms, and while we're tying it all back in together, this is actually still a net positive of 10% for sidearms, meaning rangefinder is still going to be a good option for sidearms. And I think it's still going to be a pretty good option for other things. But what I'm trying to get to is that you can still roll rangefinder on your sidearm. Granted, why use rangefinder when you could just use a Drain or a buff Traveler's Chosen, right? Or that Trespasser. There's really no point. Those sidearms already feel phenomenal, and they're only going to feel even better once this change goes live. Now, SMGs. SMGs are actually getting a mix of both buffs and nerfs. And this is actually to rein them in from the dominance they've had over auto rifles in medium ranges. Again, Bungie's really trying to suck everything into their intended zones. Firstly, they're reducing damage fall off in the distance at which the damage dealt by the weapon in hipfire reaches its lowest point. And aiming down sight extends extends this distance by a factor of the zoom from 24 meters to now 23 meters across the board. To explain fully what's going on here, when firing from the hip, your damage is reduced when your target goes beyond your effective range. However, your damage doesn't steadily decrease to zero. There is a damage floor for every weapon, and no matter the range, it will always do at least X amount of damage per bullet. That point is called damage fall off end, and that currently sits at 24 meters for SMGs. Now they're going to be moving it to 23 meters, meaning all the damage that you deal past that point will decrease faster until it hits that damage floor. Now, an easy way to avoid this is, of course, just to aim down sights. That will increase your effective range substantially. Again, though, it is a change, and I just wanted to give some clarification on this front. I think outside of like super close range, most of us are aiming down sights. Now, on precision frames, this one was a key one. Bungie is actually increasing the base damage from 16 to 17, which increases our crit damage from 22.4 to 23.8. This is actually a huge buff for submachine guns. It won't be changing the average 0.8 second time to kill value, but the forgiveness bump is going to be incredible. Currently at 10 resilience, you only need to land 9 crits to secure that 0.8 second time to kill value. After the change though, you'll just need 7 crits and 2 bodies, which is pretty significant. And while some precisions are going to be getting a nerf, things like Shayura's Wrath and Friction Fire are getting their zoom toned down, others are actually going to be shining quite brightly this week. Most notably, Osteo Striga and Inyo D, which we forgot to even cover. We talked about Anio. Now for my lightweight lovers, we are getting a nerf. Things like Funnel Web. I love using Funnel Web inside of PvP. We're getting a reduction in base damage from 11 to 10.85 and crit damage lower from 18.2 to 17.9. Again, not necessarily changing TTK, but it is making the weapon more unforgiving. And for Guardians 9 resilience or higher, do expect time to kill to go up from 0.67 to 0.73. Guys, those God Roll out of bounds and multi-max, and even those funnel webs, they're kind of getting the shaft. Now, fusion rifles. Precision frame fusions were buffed to kill in 5 bolts a while back, leaving them stronger than other archetypes. To offset this, the intrinsic precision frame perk on recoil direction has been reduced by 50% for fusion rifles only. Again, just making them more difficult to use. Now, Glaives are getting a tad bit too potent, so Bungie is actually going to be reducing the shield resist versus players from 75% to now 50%. Not much to cover here, guys. Just expect Glaive shields to just be easier to combat, although a 50% damage resist is still very, very good. Sniper rifles. We are getting yet another change to sniper rifle flinch, most notably sniper rifle settle time being increased by 60%. Now, flinch has been a major crux in the debate against the Divinity nerf. A lot of people are saying, look, there's just no way to combat flinch, hence why people have to rely on Divinity on their teams. So Bungie is actually reducing the amount of flinch taken in PvE while using a sniper. But the overall settle time is going to be something we're going to have to test out, guys, because I have no idea. 60% sounds like a lot. Granted, in PvP, snipers are not getting that flinch reduction, and of course, they're still getting that increase in settle time. So getting sniped after you land 2 crit shots on a Guardian shouldn't happen. Granted, we've heard this same statement over and over, so it's possible it's still gonna happen. We'll see. Trace rifles. They increase the effect the stability stat has on recoil reduction at the low end of the stat by 10% and at the high end by 25%. The goal here, guys, is just to increase the effectiveness of your trace rifle at longer distances. Now, I'm not gonna say we're gonna be in a trace rifle meta, but don't kid yourself. Trace rifles are actually really good. They have good time to kill values. The only thing that's really holding back trace rifles are 2 things. Is 1, being a special weapon, and 2, that thing just wants to jump out of your hands. So it's really difficult to control that recoil. We'll see how these changes go. Will we be in another laser tag meta? I don't think it's gonna get that bad, but we'll see. Rocket launchers are also getting their blast radius increased by a whopping 0.4 meters inside of PvP. I don't think that really matters. Folks are still gonna use Gallahorn or Eyes of Tomorrow or linears or machine guns, but maybe, perhaps all along, we just needed an extra 0.4 meters. Exotics. Jade Rabbit has definitely risen to the top of the meta despite it being bugged. And I know its exotic trait is bugged. Bungie is actually not really fixing it. They're reworking it. But individually, on top of the changes hitting high impacts, it's getting a reduction in 20 aim assists, bringing it from 80 to 60, which actually means Jade Rabbit is getting 2 nerfs. And I actually think that the nerf or the change coming next season is going to be a nerf despite what Bungie says about it. We'll see what plays out with it. All I can tell you is Jade Rabbit is getting dealt with in a pretty substantial way. Lord of Wolves. They're making all kinds of changes to Lord of Wolves. Reduce the aim down sight accuracy penalty 10 times and not 3 times. They also removed the 25% universal base damage buff, added a 40% additional PV damage buff, and removed the 50% critical hit multiplier penalty. They also added full auto as an intrinsic perk. Now, will this make Lord of Wolves return to its former glory? I don't think so. Again, most of these changes here are gauging PvE. Bungie wants us to be able to use the shotgun to hit more crits more consistently on higher health targets without making it overpowered in PvP. And this, of course, is being supported by the removal of the 25% damage buff that Release the Wolves was originally granting. Now, we were going to actually review Lord of Wolves earlier this season after the first nerf, but guys, it was so bad, it wasn't even worth reviewing. But this change, yeah, we'll probably re-review it. I want to see it inside of PvP. We have unstoppable shotgun. I'm curious to know if it's worth using. Now, no time to explain. This is another outlier weapon that is being dealt with, and Bungie actually went into statistics of how many more people on mouse and keyboard are using no time to explain in comparison to controller. So a targeted nerf is actually being hit here against aim assist and recoil direction. Bungie is reducing the recoil direction stat from 90 to 73, and they're reducing the aim assist stat from 45 to 40. Now, this shouldn't destroy no time to explain, but it is going to take more work to control the weapon and of course to keep it on target. Now, last but not least, Riskrunner used to grant 50% arc resistance inside of PvP, of course after taking arc damage. That has now been reduced to 15%. Did I occasionally throw on a Riskrunner to counter arc 3.0? Yes, I did. It was fantastic. Matter of fact, Riskrunner has waited years to shine for this moment right here. So the fact that it's getting dealt with in such a way, who the hell was saying Riskrunner was meta? So guys, those are all your changes going live today. Normally we're covering hotfix, and we may have time to cover the hotfix. If we have anything outside of what was mentioned in this overview, I will be covering in a brief live hotfix video that may be rolling out this afternoon. If not, be expecting a guide from us on Festival of the Lost, and also be expecting a lot of breakdowns from us in regards to Sandbox. I'm excited to try all these changes out with you guys. Sandbox changes are some of my favorite things to cover. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.